HOA started charging for water they didn't own. She called the police before I could even reel in my line, said I was trespassing on a lake my grandfather carved out of red dirt decades ago. I stayed quiet, watched it build. The signs, the fees, the fence. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need to argue. It just waits. And when the sheriff finally showed up, he didn't ask me to leave. If you've ever dealt with power like that, stick with me, and maybe hit subscribe before we see how it ends. The first cast of the morning barely rippled the surface. Lily stood beside me on the dock, both hands wrapped around her mother's old rod, tongue pressed against her lip the way she always did when she was concentrating. The mist hadn't fully burned off yet, just a thin veil hovering over the water, softening the far tree line into silhouettes. It was quiet the way it's supposed to be out here. No engines, no voices, just the low creak of wood under our boots and the occasional plunk of a fish breaking the surface. You feel that? I asked. She nodded, eyes wide, not speaking, just waiting. Don't yank it. Let it take the line. The tip dipped once, twice. Then she pulled, not hard, just enough. The rod bent clean and smooth, and her face lit up like she'd just been handed the world. I got one, she whispered, like saying it too loud might scare it off. You got one, I said. She reeled slow, steady, just like I'd shown her. The fish broke the surface, a small bass, maybe 1.5 pounds, and Lily laughed, a sharp, clear sound that carried across the water. That laugh didn't belong to the lake. Not anymore. Get off my water. The voice cut through everything, loud, sharp, out of place. I didn't turn right away. I already knew who it was. Denise Caldwell didn't walk anywhere. She arrived. I heard the crunch of gravel before I saw her, heels hitting the dirt path like punctuation. By the time I turned, she was halfway down the slope, one hand on her hip, the other holding a clipboard like it meant something. She was dressed like she had somewhere more important to be, even though she clearly didn't. White blouse, pressed slacks, sunglasses pushed up into her hair. Everything about her said control. Everything about her said she expected people to move when she spoke. You heard me, she said, stopping just short of the dock. This is HOA property. You don't have permission to be here. Lily's reel slowed. She looked up at me, then at Denise, then back at me again. I set my rod down carefully. No, I said. It's not. Denise laughed once, short and dry. Wow, she said. You really believe that, don't you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She stepped closer, close enough that her shoes were on the edge of my dirt, not the path she'd come down on. That mattered more than she realized. I've had complaints, she said, tapping the clipboard with her pen. Unauthorized access. Unregistered water use. You're in violation of community regulations. This isn't your community, I said. Her smile tightened. Everything within Lakeview Crossing falls under HOA jurisdiction, she said. That includes this lake. Lily spoke up before I could stop her. It's his lake, she said, small but firm. Denise didn't even look at her. I don't care what he told you, she said. That doesn't make it true. That did it. I stepped forward, putting myself between them. You don't talk to her like that, I said. Denise's eyes flicked up to mine, just for a second. Then she smiled again, wider this time, like she'd just found something she could use. Oh, she said. Now we're getting somewhere. She took a step back and pulled her phone out. You're refusing to comply, she said, already dialing. That's fine. We'll let the sheriff sort it out. You're calling the police? I said. I already did, she said. They're on their way. Lily's line went slack. The fish had slipped off somewhere in the middle of all that. She didn't notice. "Dad?" she said, quiet now. "It's all right," I said. "Just set the rod down." Denise stood there, watching us like she'd already won something. "You know," she said, "most people would have just left when they were told, saved themselves the trouble." I didn't move. "Most people," I said, "don't get told to leave their own property." She shook her head, almost amused. "That's going to be a problem for you," she said. "We stood there like that for maybe 2 minutes, maybe less. Time stretches in strange ways when you're waiting for something you know is coming." Then I heard it. Engines. 2 of them. They came in fast, tires crunching hard over the gravel road that cut down toward the lake. Lights hit the trees before the cars did, red and blue flashing through the branches, reflecting off the water in broken lines. Lily moved closer to me. "I didn't do anything," she said. "I know," I said. The first patrol car rolled to a stop just past Denise's SUV. The second pulled in behind it. Doors opened. Boots hit the ground. 2 deputies stepped out, hands resting near their belts. Not aggressive, but not relaxed either. They looked from Denise to me to the dock, taking it in. Denise walked up to meet them before they could take 3 steps. "Officers," she said, voice suddenly smooth. "Professional. Thank you for coming. These individuals are trespassing on private HOA property and refusing to leave." One of the deputies, older, mid-40s maybe, glanced past her at me. "Sir," he said, "can you step off the dock for me?" I did. Not because she told me to, because he did. Lily followed me, clutching the rod like she didn't know where else to put her hands. We walked up the short incline, stopping a few feet from where Denise stood, still holding that clipboard like it gave her authority. "Name?" the deputy asked. "Ethan Walker," I said. He nodded, then looked at Denise. "And you are?" "Denise Caldwell," she said. "President of Lakeview Crossing, HOA." She said it like it should matter. The deputy wrote something down, then looked back at me. "Mr. Walker," he said, "we've got a report that you're refusing to leave private property. Is that accurate?" "No," I said. "It's not." Denise let out a sharp breath. "He's lying," she said. "This lake is part of the community. We have regulations." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step forward. I just spoke. "This lake," I said, "is mine." Silence hung there for a second. The younger deputy shifted his weight. Denise smiled again, but it was thinner now. "No," she said. "It isn't." The older deputy looked between us, then out at the water, then back at the dock. "All right," he said. "Let's slow this down. Somebody's got paperwork." Denise lifted her clipboard like she'd been waiting for that. "I have all the HOA documentation right here," she said. I didn't reach for anything. Not yet, because standing there, watching her, watching the confidence in her posture, the certainty in her voice, one thing became clear in a way it hadn't before. She didn't think she might be right. She knew it. Or at least, she believed she did. And people don't push this hard, don't call the law this fast, unless they think they're standing on solid ground. Which meant one of 2 things. Either she had something I hadn't seen yet, or she'd built this entire thing on a lie so big she couldn't see past it anymore. The deputy cleared his throat. "Let's figure out who actually owns what," he said. Lily looked up at me again. "Dad," she whispered, "are we in trouble?" I rested a hand on her shoulder. "No," I said. But as I looked back at Denise, at the way she stood there like the land itself answered to her, one question settled in my mind, heavier than anything she'd said. Why was she so sure? And more importantly, what had she already done based on that belief? I didn't answer the deputy right away. Instead, I looked past him, past Denise, out over the water. That lake wasn't something you argued about. It wasn't a line on a map or a clause in a contract you could twist if you said it loud enough. It was there. Solid. Real. Measurable. It had been there long before Denise Caldwell ever decided she was in charge of anything. My grandfather built it, I said finally. The older deputy paused, pen hovering over his notepad. Built it? He said. With his own hands, I said. Back in '67. Denise let out a small laugh, like she'd heard something ridiculous. That's not how property works, she said. You don't just build a lake and claim it forever. I ignored her. There was nothing here before that, I said, still looking at the water. Just a narrow creek cutting through red clay. He rented a dozer, spent 6 weeks digging it out, diverted the flow, packed the dam himself, hauled fish in from a hatchery down in Knoxville in steel drums strapped to a flatbed. The younger deputy glanced at the lake again, like he was trying to picture it empty. And it's been in your family since then? He asked. I nodded. Deed's been on file since the day he finished it, I said. Never changed hands. Never transferred. Denise shifted beside us, impatient now. This is irrelevant, she said. The HOA manages all common areas within Lakeview Crossing. That includes… This isn't a common area, I said, cutting her off. She stopped talking. Not because she didn't want to, because I didn't raise my voice. And somehow that carried more weight than if I had. Lily's hand tightened around the rod she was still holding. I could feel it without looking. My wife used to fish here, I said, quieter now. Every Saturday morning, same spot, same dock. The older deputy lowered his pen slightly. She passed 3 years ago, I added. Lily's been using her rod ever since. For the first time since she'd walked down that bank, Denise hesitated. Just for a second. Then she recovered. That doesn't establish ownership, she said. Sentimental use doesn't override community governance. Community governance, I repeated. I let the words sit there. That subdivision over there? I said, nodding toward the ridge where the rooftops of Lakeview Crossing caught the early light. That didn't exist when this lake was built. Denise crossed her arms. Development changes jurisdiction, she said. No, I said. It doesn't. The deputies exchanged a look. All right, the older one said. Let's keep this simple. Ms. Caldwell, you're saying the HOA owns the lake? Yes, she said immediately. It's listed as a shared amenity in our community documentation. And you have a deed for it? He asked. She lifted the clipboard again. We have governing documents. That's not what I asked, he said. For the first time, her confidence didn't come back as fast. We have site plans, she said, approved by the county. That's still not a deed, he said. Silence again. Lily looked up at me. Dad, she whispered. What's a deed? It's proof, I said. Written down. Filed where it can't be argued. The older deputy nodded slightly, like he agreed with that. Mr. Walker, he said. Do you have that proof? Not on me, I said. But I know exactly where it is. Denise scoffed. Convenient, she said. I didn't react. Because the truth was, I didn't need it right then. Not for this. Then for now, the deputy said, I'm going to treat this as a civil dispute. Nobody's getting arrested today. Denise stepped forward. He's trespassing, she said sharply. You can't just leave it at that. The deputy looked at her, calm, steady. Ma'am, he said, I also can't remove someone from property without clear evidence they don't belong there. He doesn't belong there, she insisted. Then bring me the deed that says so, he replied. That landed harder than anything I'd said. Denise's jaw tightened. This isn't over, she said, turning back toward me. You're not going to keep using that lake without complying. I never needed your permission, I said. Her eyes narrowed. You will, she said, or you'll pay for it. She turned and walked back up the bank, heels cutting into the dirt with each step, phone already in her hand again. The patrol cars didn't leave right away. The deputies stayed a few minutes longer, asking a few more questions. Names, addresses, basic things, routine. But I could tell from the way the older one looked at the water, then back at me, that something had shifted. Not in my favor yet, but not in hers anymore either. When they finally pulled away, the silence came back. Not the same silence as before. This one had weight to it. Lily stepped closer to the edge of the dock, looking down at the spot where her line had been. Are we still allowed to fish? She asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the end of the dock, picked up my rod, and cast out again. The line cut clean across the surface, landing right where it always did. Yes, I said. She nodded slowly, like she wanted to believe it. But she said, I know what she said, I interrupted gently, and I know what's written down. That mattered more. It always had. Lily baited her hook again, movements slower now, less certain. We stood there for another 20 minutes. No bites. Didn't matter. The morning had already changed. As we packed up, I looked once more toward the ridge. Lakeview Crossing. Rows of houses built on land that used to be pasture. Clean lines, fresh paint, identical driveways leading down to one road. One road. I'd driven that road my whole life without thinking about it. Never needed to. Because it had always been there. The same way the lake had. The same way the boundaries had. Fixed. Recorded. Permanent. But Denise hadn't come down that bank acting unsure. She hadn't hesitated when she called the police. She hadn't questioned whether she had the right. Which meant this wasn't a mistake. It was a system. And systems like that don't start with one bad assumption. They build over time, layer by layer, decision by decision, until nobody remembers where the truth was supposed to be. I opened the truck door for Lily. She climbed in, still quiet. You all right? I asked. She nodded. I just didn't like how she talked, she said. Neither did I replied. I closed the door and stood there for a second longer, looking back down the gravel road that led out to the county line. The only way in. The only way out. And if she was that confident about the lake, then she'd been just as confident about everything connected to it. Fees, access, control. I got in the truck, started the engine, and let it idle. Because one thing was already clear. This wasn't going to end with a conversation on a dock. If she believed that lake belonged to her, then somewhere, in writing or in practice, she'd already started acting like it did. And that meant there was something out there. Something filed. Something built. Something enforced. Something wrong. The question wasn't whether she was mistaken. The question was how far she'd gone before anyone stopped her. I got my answer 2 days later. It came in a white envelope, tucked halfway into my mailbox like it didn't belong there. No stamp, no return address, just my name printed in bold black ink across the front. Lily was inside finishing homework when I pulled it out. I stood there by the truck for a second, turning it over in my hand. It wasn't official, not government, not county, but it was trying to look like it was. That told me everything I needed to know before I even opened it. I tore it clean across the top. Inside was a single sheet, heavy paper, HOA letterhead printed at the top like a badge. Lakeview Crossing, Homeowners Association. Notice of violation. I read the first line once, then again, then slower. Unauthorized use of community lake facilities. Failure to register for access privileges. Non-compliance with HOA governance. Immediate action required. There it was, not a question, not a request, a statement, a claim, followed by a number. $200 annual lake access fee. Due immediately, I let out a breath through my nose, folded the paper once, and leaned against the truck. It wasn't the amount. It was the wording. Access. Like I was asking permission to step onto something I'd grown up on. Like the dock I built with my own hands was suddenly part of a brochure. Lily opened the front door behind me. "Dad?" she called. "You coming in?" "In a minute," I said. I looked back down at the letter, at the signature line. Denise Caldwell, HOA President, printed clean, confident, like she'd signed 100 of these already. I walked inside and set the paper on the kitchen counter. Lily came over, craning her neck. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing that matters," I said. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. That night, I slid the letter into a drawer with a stack of old receipts and forgot about it, or at least, I told myself I did, because part of me expected that to be the end of it. One overstep, one assumption. Corrected the next time I showed up with paperwork in hand. That's how things are supposed to work. But people like Denise don't operate on supposed to. They operate on response. And I hadn't given her one. 3 days later, the second letter showed up. This one came through the mail. Stamped. Tracked. Official. I knew before I opened it that the tone would be different. I was right. Final notice. Non-compliance, no greeting. No explanation. Just escalation. Failure to remit payment constitutes continued violation. Daily fines may be assessed. Legal action may be pursued to enforce HOA regulations. At the bottom, outstanding balance, $200. Potential penalties, $50 per day. I read that line twice. $50 a day, for standing on my own land, for fishing my own water, for ignoring something that had no authority in the first place. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was a system, a process she'd used before. Send the first letter. Wait. If there's no response, escalate. Add pressure. Add consequences. Make it uncomfortable enough that people stop asking whether it's right and start asking how to make it stop. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the paper again. There was no mention of a deed, no reference to county records, no legal description of the property. Just community lake, repeated twice, like saying it enough times made it true. Lily walked in from the living room holding her mother's rod. "Are we going this Saturday?" she asked. I looked at her. At the way she held it, careful, like it could break if she gripped it too tight. "Yeah," I said. "We are." "What about that lady?" she asked. "She can say whatever she wants," I replied. "Doesn't change what's written down." She nodded, but I could see it in her face. She was thinking about the police, about the way they'd walked toward us, about the way Denise had stood there like she was in charge of everything. And that mattered. More than the letter. More than the money. Perception. That's what people like Denise rely on. If enough people believe something, if it looks official, if it sounds like authority, then most folks won't question it. They'll comply, they'll pay. They'll stay quiet. I folded the second letter and set it on top of the first. 2 pieces of paper. Same claim. Stronger tone. No proof. That told me something else. She didn't have documentation. If she did, it would have been in that envelope, front and center, stamped, recorded, impossible to ignore. Instead, she had language, structure, pressure, which meant whatever she was building, it wasn't based on ownership. It was based on assumption. And assumptions only hold as long as nobody tests them. Saturday morning, we went back to the lake. Same time, same dock, same water. But it didn't feel the same. Not because anything had changed out there, but because something had changed around it. I saw it before we even got out of the truck. Metal. Shiny. New. Bolted into the ground, right at the edge of the shoreline. I didn't say anything. I just stepped out and walked toward it. Lily followed behind me, slower this time. Careful, like she already knew. The sign was mounted on 2 steel posts sunk deep into the dirt. Powder-coated aluminum, clean edges, professional, not something you throw together overnight. The words were printed in bold black lettering. Lakeview Crossing HOA, private lake unauthorized use prohibited violators. Subject to fine. As he stood there for a second, reading it. Then I looked down at the ground. Fresh dirt around the posts, still loose, still unsettled. This wasn't something she'd planned weeks ago. This was a response. To me. To my silence. To the fact that I didn't push back. Lily stepped up beside me. She read it once. Then again. Then she looked up. "Dad,"
I don't know if I can do
she said quietly. "Are we not allowed to fish here anymore?"
Look at me.
That question landed harder than the letters.
I am right here.
Harder than the police, harder than anything Denise had said. Because it wasn't about authority. It was about doubt. And doubt spreads faster than anything else. I crouched down so I was level with her. "This is our lake," I said. "It's always been our lake." She looked back at the sign. "But it says—" "I know what it says," I interrupted gently. "And I know who put it there." She didn't argue. She just nodded. Because she trusted me. And that meant I didn't get to be wrong. I stood up and pulled my phone out, took a picture of the sign, then another. Close-up of the bolts, the posts, the ground, the wording, time-stamped, saved. Then I stepped back and looked at it one more time. Denise hadn't just sent letters. She'd planted something. Physical. Visible. A claim you couldn't ignore. A line drawn where no line existed. And once you do that, once you put it in the ground, you're not just assuming ownership anymore. You're declaring it, publicly, which meant she'd crossed from pressure into proof. Not of ownership, but of action. And action leaves a record. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and picked up my rod. "Come on," I said. Lily hesitated, then followed me onto the dock. We fished right beside that sign. Lines in the water, hooks set where they'd always been. The metal post standing 10 feet away like it belonged there. It didn't. And the longer it stayed, the more it worked in my favor. Because now, she wasn't just claiming something that wasn't hers. She was putting it in writing, in steel, in the ground. And every day it stood there was another day she was building a case. She just didn't know whose. By Monday, the sign wasn't the only thing that had changed. I drove past the entrance to Lakeview Crossing on my way into town and saw a new banner stretched across the community board near the mailbox cluster. Now open. Private lake access for residents. Managed by HOA, big letters. Clean print. Laminated. Official enough to convince anyone who didn't know better. I slowed the truck just enough to read the smaller line underneath. Registration required. See HOA office. That was new. Not a suggestion. A system. I kept driving, because I didn't need to guess what came next. I just needed to confirm it. That afternoon, I walked into the HOA clubhouse. It sat right in the center of the subdivision, a low brick building with a glass door and a folding sign out front that read, Lake Access Registration. Today, 3 to 6 p. Through the window, I could see her, Denise Caldwell, standing behind a table, papers spread out in neat stacks, a laptop open, clipboard within reach, like she'd been preparing for this her whole life. I stepped inside. The room smelled like new carpet and cheap air freshener. A couple of residents stood off to the side, filling out forms. Nobody looked up when I walked in. Denise did. Her expression didn't change much, just a slight lift at the corner of her mouth. I was wondering when you'd show up, she said. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the table and looked down at the papers. Forms, printed, structured, name, address, lot number, lake access tier. There were options: basic, premium, annual, daily. I picked one up. Charging people for this now? I asked. She folded her hands. Managing a community asset requires funding, she said. Something you clearly don't understand. I set the paper back down. You don't own it, I said. She didn't even blink. We manage it, she replied. That's not the same thing. It is when the community recognizes it, she said. There it was again. Not law, not proof. Recognition, perception, agreement. She wasn't building a legal claim. She was building acceptance. I glanced over at the residents filling out forms. One of them looked up just for a second, then back down again. They weren't questioning it. Why would they? The sign was up. The forms were printed. The president said it was theirs. That's enough for most people. You're collecting money, I said, for something you don't have a deed for. Her smile widened. You keep saying that like it matters, she said. It does. Only if someone challenges it, she replied. That landed exactly the way she meant it to, because she knew something I hadn't said out loud yet. I hadn't challenged it. Not formally. Not in a way that forced her to prove anything. I'd just ignored it. And she'd filled that silence with structure. Forms, fees, process, control. You're going to want to register, she said, sliding a form toward me. Otherwise, your continued use will be documented as non-compliance. I didn't touch it. Document whatever you want, I said. Oh, I will, she replied. No hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. That was the part that didn't sit right. Not the arrogance, the confidence. Because people bluff, but they don't build systems around a bluff unless they think it will hold. You got legal counsel telling you to do this? I asked. She leaned back slightly. That's not your concern, she said. It wasn't an answer. But it was enough. No attorney in this county would sign off on claiming ownership of land without a deed. Not in writing. Not publicly. Not with money attached to it. Which meant she was doing this without one. That mattered. I turned to leave. Make sure you keep copies, I said. Of what? She asked. All of it, I replied. Forms, payments, sign-ins. She laughed. Why would I need to do that? I paused at the door. Because if you're right, I said, you'll need records. And if I'm not? She asked. I looked back at her. Then you'll really need them. For the first time since I'd walked in, she didn't have a response ready. Just a flicker. Quick. Gone. I stepped outside and let the door close behind me. The gravel in the parking lot shifted under my boots as I walked back to the truck. I didn't start the engine right away. just sat there, thinking. She'd moved faster than I expected. From claim, to structure, to revenue. That wasn't reactive. That was planned. And if she was collecting money, then there were records, transactions, numbers, paper trails, which meant this wasn't just about access anymore. It was about liability. I pulled my phone out and opened the photos from Saturday. The sign, the posts, the ground. I added a new folder. Caldwell. Lake saved everything there. Then I added a note. Date, time, what I'd seen, what she'd said. Every detail I could remember. Because if she was going to document non-compliance, then I was going to document everything else. I started the truck and drove back toward the lake. Didn't get out this time. Just sat at the top of the slope and looked down. The sign was still there. Same place, same angle, same claim. Only now it wasn't alone. It had support, structure, money moving around it. That changed things. Because a sign can be ignored. A letter can be thrown away. But once people start paying, it becomes something else. Something bigger. Something harder to unwind. I leaned back in the seat and watched the water for a long moment. Then I noticed something new. Movement. Bright colors. Plastic. 3 kayaks pulled up along the bank on the far side. Didn't belong there. Didn't belong to anyone in my family. Didn't belong on that water. Which meant she'd already moved to the next step. Access, use, expansion. I exhaled slowly. She wasn't testing boundaries anymore. She was taking ground. And every step she took, every dollar she collected, every structure she built, was another piece of evidence, not against me, against herself. The only question now was how long I let her keep going before I stopped it. The answer came faster than I expected. By the next Saturday, there were 8 kayaks, bright plastic, stacked in a wooden rack that hadn't been there a week ago, bolted into the ground along the south bank, my bank, facing the water like they belonged. They didn't. Each one had a laminated tag zip-tied to the handle. Lakeview Crossing. Resident use only. I didn't walk down right away. I stood at the top of the slope with Lily beside me and just looked at it. The rack, the kayaks, the sign, the pattern. This wasn't random anymore. This was infrastructure. "Dad," Lily said quietly. "Whose are those?" I didn't answer right away. "Not ours," I said finally. We walked down together, slow, deliberate. There were already people on the water. 2 adults in 1 kayak, drifting near the center, paddles dipping in uneven rhythm. A third sat closer to the dock, spinning in place like they didn't quite know what they were doing. They looked relaxed, comfortable, like they'd paid for the right to be there. One of them waved. "Morning," he called out. "Beautiful spot." I nodded once. "Sure is. You live in the subdivision?" he asked. "No," I said. He hesitated. "Oh," he said. "We just signed up this week. HOA's been talking about opening it up for a while." I didn't correct him. Not yet. "Good fishing?" he asked. "It can be," I said. He smiled and paddled off. Lily watched them go. "They don't know," she said. "No," I replied. "They don't." And that was the problem. This wasn't just Denise making claims anymore. This was other people acting on them, using the lake, paying for it, believing it, which meant the damage wasn't theoretical. It was active. I walked over to the kayak rack and crouched down. Fresh lumber, clean cuts, metal brackets driven deep into the soil, installed recently. No permits posted, no markers, no boundaries acknowledged, just placed, like everything else she'd done. I pulled my phone out. Photos, angles, close-ups, the tags, the rack, the placement relative to the shoreline. Everything went into the same folder. Caldwell. Lake Lily stood a few feet away, watching me. "Are you going to tell them?" she asked. "Not today," I said. "Why not?" "Because telling them didn't fix anything. Because arguing on the bank didn't change what had already been built. Because every minute that rack stood there, every person who used it, every dollar that changed hands, was another piece of something bigger." "They're not the problem," I said. "They're just part of it." She nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but trusting me anyway. We fished. Same spot, same dock, same water. But it felt different now. Not because the lake had changed, but because we weren't alone anymore. Every cast felt watched, every movement shared. Not physically, but in ownership, in perception, in the quiet shift from private to community. Halfway through the morning, a woman in a visor paddled up close to the dock. "You mind if we tie up here for a second?" she asked. I looked at the rope in her hand, at the way she said it. Polite, casual, like she was asking to use a public space. I shook my head. "I do mind," I said. She blinked. "Oh," she said. "I thought this was part of the HOA lake." "It's not," I replied. She looked confused. "But we paid for access," she said. I held her gaze for a second. "Then you paid the wrong person." That landed, not hard, but enough. She hesitated, then pushed off with her paddle and drifted back toward the others. No argument, no pushback, just uncertainty. That was the first crack. Small, quiet, but real. Lily leaned closer to me. "Is she going to get in trouble?" she asked. "No," I said. "She's not the one who made the decision. We packed up earlier than usual, not because we had to, because staying longer didn't add anything. Not yet." On the drive out, we passed the entrance sign again. This time there was a small folding table set up beside it. Denise stood behind it. Clipboard, forms, cash box, a line of residents waiting, paying, registering, committing. I slowed the truck just enough to see clearly. One of the residents handed her a check. She wrote something down, tore off a receipt, smiled. Transaction complete. I kept driving, because stopping there wouldn't do anything. Not yet. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with both letters spread out in front of me, the photos open on my phone, the timeline building in my head. Letter, escalation, sign, structure, revenue. Each step documented, each step intentional, each step pushing further past what she could actually prove. Lily sat across from me, drawing. Quiet, focused. The rod leaned against the wall behind her. Same place it always was. That mattered. I picked up the second letter again, the one with the fines. Read it slower this time, looking for something I might have missed. There it was, small, buried in the middle of the page. Failure to comply may result in additional fees, including maintenance and usage assessments. Maintenance. Usage. Plural. Not just the lake, more than that. I set the paper down, because suddenly, this wasn't just about water, it was about everything connected to it. Access, upkeep, control. I stood up and walked to the window, looked out toward the direction of the road that led to the lake. Gravel. One lane. Runs straight from the county line through the edge of Lakeview Crossing and down to the water. Everyone used it. Every car, every delivery, every school bus. No alternative. Never needed one. Because it had always been there. Built at the same time as the lake. Maintained by my family. Unchanged. Unquestioned. Until now. I went back to the table and opened another folder on my phone. New one. Caldwell. Road. Because if she was collecting maintenance fees, if she was expanding beyond the lake, then she wasn't just claiming water. She was claiming access. And access is where things get complicated. Because land can be argued. Water can be misunderstood. But roads are measurable, defined, recorded, filed in ways that don't leave room for interpretation. I looked back down at the letters, at the language, at the structure she'd built. Then at the photos of the rack, the sign, the people, the payments. And for the first time since she walked down that bank and called the police, I saw the full shape of it. Not just what she was taking, but how she was taking it. Piece by piece, layer by layer, until nobody questioned it. Until it felt normal. Until it felt like it had always been that way. I leaned back in the chair and let that settle. Because the longer she kept going, the more she built, the more she collected, the harder it would be to undo. For her. Not for me. And that changed the equation. Because this wasn't about stopping her early anymore. This was about letting her go just far enough that when it came down, it didn't just crack, it collapsed. The only thing left to decide was how much more she was going to add to the pile before I pulled it out from under her. I didn't go back to the lake the next day, or the day after that. That was the part people never understood. They expect a reaction, an argument, a confrontation, something loud enough to match what's being done to you. But noise doesn't win these kinds of fights. Records do. So I stayed quiet, and I went to work. The first thing I pulled out was my transit case. Steel latches, worn from years of use. Inside, everything I needed: tripod, total station, prism rod, tools that don't guess, tools that don't assume, tools that measure. By mid-morning, I was standing at the north boundary of the property, driving a stake into the ground exactly where the original survey said it should be. Coordinates matched. No drift. No deviation. That mattered. Because if the edges are right, everything inside them is too. I worked clockwise. Boundary point to boundary point. Every corner verified. Every line confirmed. I didn't rush it. Didn't skip anything. Because this wasn't just about knowing where the land was. It was about proving it in a way nobody could argue with later. By noon, I was down by the lake. Tripod set just off the dock. Prism planted on the far bank. Numbers coming back clean. Exactly where they'd always been. The sign sat 10 feet to my right. Inside the line. Not close, not questionable. Inside. That mattered more than anything she'd said. I took a photo, then another, zoomed in on the base of the post, captured the coordinates, time-stamped everything, saved it. Caldwell. Lake. Next was the kayak rack. Same process, same result. Inside, no easement, no shared boundary, no legal argument that could place it anywhere but where it was. On my land. I didn't touch it. Didn't move it. Didn't even loosen a bolt. Because removing it ends the action. Leaving it documents it. I moved on to the road. That was where things got interesting. Dawson Ridge Road runs just under 3/4 of a mile from the county line to the lake. Gravel. Single lane. Wide enough for 2 vehicles if one pulls off. It cuts through the edge of Lakeview Crossing before reaching my property. Always has. Always needed to. Because without it, there's no access. I set up at the entrance, ran the first line, then the second, pulled up the original plat from memory as I worked. Didn't need to check it yet. I already knew what it would say, but knowing and proving are two different things. By mid-afternoon, I had enough. Enough points, enough confirmation, enough alignment with the original deed descriptions to say it without hesitation. The road hadn't moved. The boundaries hadn't shifted. Nothing about the land had changed. Only the claims on top of it. I packed up and headed back to the house. Didn't go inside right away. Went straight to the back room instead. The cabinet sat where it always had. Green steel, heavy, locked. I opened it slow. The smell hit first. Old paper, oil, time. Everything my grandfather thought was worth keeping ended up in that cabinet. Deeds, tax records, survey notes, things you don't throw away because you might need them one day. I pulled the lake deed first, filed 1967, Dawson Family Trust. Legal description matched exactly what I'd just measured. No transfers, no amendments, no changes. Then I pulled the road. Separate document, same year, same filing, same language. Dawson Ridge Access Road retained under trust ownership in perpetuity. There it was, clear, uncomplicated, permanent. I set both documents on the workbench and just looked at them for a second. Because this wasn't about proving I owned the lake anymore. That part was simple. This was about everything connected to it. And everything connected to it. Ran through that road. I went back to the table and opened the second letter again. The one with the fines. The one with the maintenance line. Read it slower this time. Now it made sense. She wasn't just collecting for the lake. She was collecting for access. For upkeep. For something she didn't just not own. She depended on. I grabbed a pen and did the math. Quick, rough, enough to get a number. 120 homes, $200 lake fee, plus whatever she was charging for maintenance. Multiply that over even a single year. It wasn't small. Multiply it over several. It wasn't just overreach anymore. It was exposure. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Because now I understood something she didn't. She thought she was controlling access, but she wasn't. She was using it. Every resident, every vehicle, every delivery, every school bus. All of it ran across something she didn't own, something she couldn't replace, something she couldn't reroute, which meant the power dynamic she thought she had didn't exist. Not really. Not if someone decided to test it. I sat up and pulled out my phone, opened a new note, started logging everything. Dates, times, actions, what I saw, what I measured, what she built, what she charged. No opinions, no emotion, just facts. Because facts hold. Emotion doesn't. Lily knocked on the doorframe. "Dinner's ready," she said. I nodded. "Be there in a minute." She hesitated. "Are we going back this weekend?" she asked. I looked at her, at the way she stood there, waiting. Not just for an answer, for certainty. "Yeah," I said. "We are." She smiled, just a little, and disappeared back down the hall. I looked back at the documents one more time. Lake, road, ownership. Not claimed, not assumed. Recorded, filed, verified. Then I thought about Denise, about the table, the forms, the payments, the rack, the sign. Everything she'd built on top of something she didn't understand. And for the first time since this started, I didn't feel angry, didn't feel frustrated, didn't feel the need to push back. Because this wasn't a fight anymore. It was a timeline, and timelines favor the person who documents them. I closed the cabinet, locked it, and turned off the light, because the more I measured, the clearer it became. This wasn't going to end with a conversation, or a warning, or even a correction. It was going to end when everything she'd built on that assumption got measured against what was actually written down and didn't match. That was the difference. Everything Denise built, every sign, every fee, every rule, existed on the surface. What I had sat underneath it, recorded, filed, unchanged, and the deeper I looked, the more it shifted from a disagreement to something else entirely. Monday morning, I drove the full length of Dawson Ridge Road. Not out of habit, out of intent. I started at the county line, parked the truck just off the shoulder and stepped out, boots hitting gravel that I'd personally laid down the previous spring. Still held. No washout. No drift. Maintenance. Done by me. Not by an HOA. Not by a contractor. Not by anyone collecting fees for it. I walked the first 100 yards, eyes on the edges. Fence lines. Ditches. Drainage cuts. Everything exactly where it had always been. Then I got back in and drove forward, into Lakeview Crossing. The shift was immediate. Houses on both sides, driveways feeding into the road, mailboxes lined up in clean rows, cars parked, kids' bikes leaning against garage doors. Normal life. Built around something they didn't question. Because why would they? The road was there. That was enough. I slowed near the clubhouse. The same folding table was out front. Denise stood behind it again, talking to a couple I didn't recognize, clipboard in hand, cash box open. She looked up as I passed. Didn't wave, didn't smile. Just watched, like she was tracking something. I kept driving, because what mattered wasn't what she thought. It was what she was doing. And what she was doing ran through this road. I drove all the way to the lake, then turned around and headed back. This time slower, watching, counting, driveways, connections, points of access. There weren't many options. In fact, there weren't any. Every house in that subdivision depended on this stretch of gravel. Every delivery truck, every emergency vehicle, every school bus. All of it funneled through one path, one entry, one exit, and every inch of it matched the deed in my cabinet. I pulled over halfway back and shut the engine off. Silence settled in around me. Not empty, just clear. I stepped out and walked to the edge of the road, looking down at the gravel. Same composition as the lake bank, same soil, same foundation. Because it was built at the same time, by the same man, under the same document. I pulled my phone out and opened the note I'd started. Added a new line. Road access confirmed. Single entry/exit for entire subdivision. Then another. No alternate route visible or recorded. I stood there for a moment longer, letting it settle. Because this wasn't just leverage. This was dependency. Denise thought she controlled access. She didn't. She relied on it. And that difference changes everything. I got back in the truck and headed into town. Didn't stop at the house. Didn't go to the lake. Went straight to the county records office. The clerk at the front desk didn't ask many questions. Didn't need to. I gave her the parcel numbers. She pulled the files. Hard copies. Stamped. Filed. Unambiguous. Lake. Road. Trust ownership. No transfers. No amendments. No recorded easements beyond basic utility access. Nothing granting the HOA any authority over either. I took copies, paid the fee, walked out with a folder that said everything Denise's clipboard didn't. Back in the truck, I sat there for a minute, looking at the papers, then at the road in front of me, then back at the papers again. Because now it wasn't just what I knew. It was what I could prove. And proof changes the timeline. I drove back through the subdivision one more time on the way home. This time I noticed something else. A small sign near the entrance. New, mounted low, easy to miss. Road maintenance fee included in HOA dues. I stopped, got out, walked up to it, read it twice, then took a photo because there it was, in writing. Not just lake access, not just usage, maintenance, on something they didn't own, on something I maintained, every spring, every year, out of pocket, without a second thought. And they were charging for it. That was the moment it shifted completely. From overreach to liability, because collecting money under false ownership isn't just wrong, it's traceable, documented, recoverable. I got back in the truck and drove home. Lily was in the yard when I pulled in, tossing a ball against the fence. She caught it, looked up, and walked over. "You were gone a while," she said. "Had to check something," I replied. She nodded. "Are we still going this weekend?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "We are." She studied my face for a second. "You don't look mad anymore," she said. "I'm not," I answered. That wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't the same kind of anger. Not the kind that makes you react. The kind that makes you wait. I went inside and laid the documents out on the table. Lake deed, road deed, county copies, photos on my phone, notes building in order, clean, structured, unavoidable. Then I added one more line. Estimated collected fees, lake plus road. I ran the numbers again, more precise this time. Not rough, not guessed, calculated. Year over year, house count, fee structure, conservative estimate, still high enough to matter, high enough to cross a line. I sat back and looked at everything together, because now, it wasn't just a story. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was a record. One that showed exactly what she'd done and exactly where it broke. I closed the folder and slid it to the center of the table, because the next step wasn't measuring, wasn't documenting, wasn't waiting. It was choosing the moment. Because once I moved, once I put this in front of the right people, it wouldn't slow her down. It would stop her completely. And the only thing that mattered now was timing. Because Denise Caldwell thought she owned the lake, thought she controlled the road, thought she had authority. But what she actually had was 8 years of assumptions stacked on top of something she never checked. And every single one of those assumptions ran through one piece of ground that she didn't own, the same piece every resident used, every single day, which meant when this shifted, it wouldn't just affect her. It would hit everything she'd built, all at once. And there was no way she saw it coming, because she never stopped to measure it. That didn't stop her from pushing further. If anything, it made her bolder. The fence went up on a Wednesday. I saw it before I even turned off the engine. Chain link, 6 feet high. Fresh posts set deep into the ground along the south bank of the lake. It ran nearly 50 yards, cutting across the easiest access point to the water. There was a gate in the middle. Locked. Padlock still bright from the store shelf. A new sign zip-tied to the mesh. Authorized HOA members only. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Prosecuted. Not fined, not warned. Prosecuted. That word wasn't for residents. That was for intimidation. I stepped out of the truck and walked straight to the fence. Didn't rush, didn't hesitate, just walked. Lily stayed by the passenger door, watching. "Dad," she called softly. "I see it," I said. The ground around the posts was still disturbed. Fresh concrete at the base. No erosion. No weathering. Installed within the last 48 hours. No permits posted. No survey markers respected. No boundary acknowledgement at all. Just driven straight into my land. I ran my hand along the wire. Cold. Rigid. Temporary. Because anything built without a right to stand doesn't last. Lily walked up beside me. She stared through the fence at the dock. At the exact spot she always fished. At the place where her mother used to sit every Saturday morning. "That's Mom's spot," she said. Not loud, not angry, just stating it. That hit harder than anything Denise had done so far. Not the letters, not the police, not the fees. This was different. Because this wasn't about control. It was about denial. Blocking access, physically, visibly, to something that never belonged to anyone else. I crouched down beside her. "This doesn't change anything," I said. She didn't answer right away. Just kept looking through the fence. "It feels like it does," she said. I nodded. "I know." And I did, because fences don't just block land. They shift perception. They make people hesitate, question, second guess. And that hesitation is what people like Denise count on. I stood back up and pulled my phone out. Photos, angles, close-ups of the lock, the hinges, the sign, the posts. Then I stepped back and took a wider shot. Fence line, lake, dock behind it. Clear, undeniable. Then I added it to the folder. Caldwell, lake. Every piece in order, every step recorded, because this wasn't escalation anymore. This was overreach, clear, documented, indisputable, and she wasn't done. The rumors started that same week, subtle at first, then louder. A neighbor stopped me at the gas station. "Hey," he said, shifting his weight. "Heard you've been causing some issues down by the lake." I looked at him. "What kind of issues?" He hesitated. "Just heard you weren't cooperating with the HOA," he said. "Something about refusing to follow regulations." I nodded once. "That what they told you?" He shrugged. "Just what I heard. That's how it works. Not direct accusations. Just enough suggestion to change how people see you." Later that afternoon, another one came. Different tone. "Careful," a woman said quietly as she passed me outside the hardware store. "They're saying you're unstable, that you've been threatening people." I stopped, turned. "What people?" She didn't answer, just shook her head and walked away. That was new. Not just control, not just fees, reputation, isolation. Push someone far enough out of the picture, and nobody questions what you replace them with. I got back in the truck and drove home, because rumors don't matter unless they stick, and they only stick if there's nothing to counter them. That night, I reviewed everything again. Letters, photos, survey data, deeds, now the fence, now the rumors. The pattern was clear. Escalation through pressure, then reinforcement through perception, then expansion, always expanding, until nobody remembered where it started, or who it actually belonged to. Saturday morning came again. We drove down anyway. Same time, same routine. Except this time, we stopped at the fence, didn't go around, didn't look for another path. Just stopped. Lily stood beside me, rod in hand. "What do we do?" she asked. I looked at the lock, at the chain wrapped tight around the gate, at the sign hanging just above it. Then I looked past it, at the dock, at the water, at everything that hadn't changed, except the claim on top of it. "We don't rush," I said. She frowned. "Why not?" "Because she's still building," I replied. That didn't make sense to her. Not yet. But it would. I turned back toward the truck. "We're not done," I said. We drove away. Didn't argue. Didn't confront. Didn't give her what she expected. Because this wasn't about reacting to what she'd done. It was about letting her go just far enough that when it came down, it took everything with it. And she wasn't there yet. Not quite. But she was getting close. Because the next step, the one she didn't realize she was about to take, was the one that turned this from overreach into something the law doesn't ignore. And once she crossed that line, there wouldn't be any walking it back. She crossed it 2 days later. I came home just before dark and found the road blocked. Not partially, not narrowed, blocked. 3 truckloads of crushed gravel dumped across Dawson Ridge Road, piled chest-high in a jagged wall that stretched from ditch to ditch. Fresh, still warm from the haul. Tire ruts cut deep into the edges where the trucks had turned out. I parked at the county line and stared at it for a full minute. Didn't move, didn't speak. Because this wasn't about inconvenience. This was obstruction. Deliberate. Total. I walked the rest of the way in. Gravel under my boots. Quarter mile, half mile. Lily was on the porch when I got there, backpack still on. "The bus didn't come," she said. I stopped. "What do you mean it didn't come?" "It turned around," she said. "Mrs. Patterson brought me home." She said it like it was normal, like it made sense. It didn't. "Did anyone say why?" I asked. She shook her head. "They just said the road was blocked." That was it. That was the line. Not the fence, not the fees, not the rumors, this blocking access. Cutting off a public route used by families, kids, deliveries. Because she thought she could. Because nobody had stopped her yet. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. "Go inside," I told Lily. "I'll be in a minute." She hesitated, then went. I turned and walked back down the road. Same path, same gravel, same silence. Only now, everything had shifted. Because this wasn't about land anymore. It was about impact. Real, immediate, unavoidable. And that's where systems break. I got back to the truck and drove straight into town. Didn't stop at the house, didn't go to the lake, went straight to one place, Rachel Kim's office. She didn't waste time when I walked in, didn't ask for small talk, just pointed to the chair and said, "Tell me what happened." So I did. Everything. Start to finish. The police, the letters, the sign, the rack, the fees, the fence, the rumors, and now, the road. She didn't interrupt, just took notes. Occasionally nodded, occasionally circled something. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me for a long second. "Do you have documentation?" she asked. I slid the folder across the desk. "Everything I could get," I said. She opened it, flipped through. Slow, careful. Then she stopped on the road deed, read it once, then again, then looked up. "They've been collecting maintenance fees?" she asked. "According to their own signage," I said. She flipped to the photos. The sign, the rack, the fence, the roadblock. Each one labeled, time-stamped, placed. She leaned back again, this time slower. "They didn't just overstep," she said. "They built a structure on top of something they don't own. That's what it looks like." "No," she said. "That's what it is." She tapped the road deed. "This changes everything." I didn't say anything, because I already knew. "Blocking this road," she continued, "that's not an HOA issue. That's interference with access. That's civil, possibly criminal depending on how it's handled. And the fees? I asked. She flipped back to the letters. To charge for access or maintenance on property they don't own? She said. That's misrepresentation. If money changed hands based on that claim. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I leaned forward. What do we do? She closed the folder. We don't rush, she said. I almost smiled. Good, I replied. Because I haven't been. She nodded. Then we use that, she said. You've got a timeline. You've got documentation. You've got escalation. And now you've got impact. She stood up and walked to the window, looked out for a second, then turned back. When's their next HOA meeting? She asked. End of the week, I said. Thursday night. She nodded once. That's where this breaks, she said. How? I asked. Publicly, she replied. She picked the folder back up and tapped it once. We put this in front of everyone at once. Residents, board members, anyone who's been paying into this system. And the sheriff? I asked. I'll make a call, she said. That was it. No long speech. No complicated plan. Just timing. Because once this came out, once the documents were laid next to her claims, there wouldn't be anything left to argue. I drove back home that night in silence. Not the heavy kind. The clear kind. Because for the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was moving. Thursday came fast. The clubhouse was full. More people than I'd ever seen in one place in that subdivision. Chairs packed tight, voices low, tension in the air. Denise stood at the front like she always did. Clipboard, papers, control. She didn't see me come in at first, too focused on the room, on the crowd, on the attention. That changed when Rachel walked in beside me. Then the sheriff, Sheriff Daniel Cruz, full uniform, badge catching the light. That got her attention. Her posture shifted, just a little, not enough for most people to notice, enough for me. Rachel stepped forward first. Didn't ask permission. Didn't wait. Just spoke. We're here to address a claim of ownership, she said, and the actions taken based on that claim. The room went quiet. Denise opened her mouth, closed it again. Rachel placed the folder on the table, opened it, turned it so the room could see. Lake deed, she said. Filed, recorded, unchanged. Then the next page. Road deed. Same. Then the photos. Sign. Fence, rack, roadblock, each one clear, each one undeniable. These structures, Rachel continued, were placed on property not owned by the HOA. She paused. Let that settle. Then, these fees, she said, holding up the letter, were collected under that same assumption. The room shifted, voices starting, questions forming. Denise stepped forward. That's not accurate, she said sharply. We have documentation. Then show it, Rachel replied. Silence, because there wasn't anything to show. Sheriff Cruz stepped forward then. Not aggressive, not loud, just present. Ma'am, he said, we're going to need to talk about the road obstruction first. That's when it broke. Not slowly, not quietly, all at once. Because the moment he said it, the room understood. Not just the lake, not just the fees, everything. And Denise, for the first time, didn't have control of the room anymore. And there was nothing she could do to get it back. The silence hit first. Not empty, heavy, like the entire room had just realized something at the same time and didn't know what to do with it. Denise stood there at the front, one hand still resting on the edge of the table, the other gripping her clipboard tighter than she realized. Her mouth opened once, closed again, then opened a second time. No words came out, because there weren't any left that worked. Rachel didn't raise her voice, didn't push. She just turned another page. "These documents," she said, calm and clear, "establish ownership of both the lake and the access road under Ethan Walker's family trust. No transfer has ever been recorded. No easement exists granting the HOA authority to charge for access or maintenance." A man in the second row stood up. "What does that mean for the fees?" he asked. Rachel didn't hesitate. "It means they were collected under false representation," she said. That word moved through the room fast. Not shouted, not repeated, just understood. Denise stepped forward, finally finding something to hold on to. "That's not accurate," she said, voice sharper now. "We've operated under established community governance." Residents agreed. "Agreement doesn't override recorded ownership," Rachel cut in. Denise's composure slipped for half a second. "Just enough." "You don't understand how HOAs function," she said. "I understand exactly how they function," Rachel replied. "And I understand where their authority ends." Sheriff Cruz stepped closer then. Not aggressive, not loud, but unmistakable. "Ma'am," he said, "we need to address the road obstruction." Every head in the room turned, because that wasn't theoretical. That wasn't paperwork. That was something they all felt. "My daughter's bus couldn't get through," someone said from the back. "I missed a delivery," another voice added. "Emergency vehicles," someone else started. Denise raised her hand. "That was a temporary measure," she said quickly, "to control unauthorized access while this situation was being reviewed." "You don't have authority to block a private road used for access," Sheriff Cruz said. "Not without coordination, not without notice, and not without ownership." That word again. Ownership. It kept coming back to that. Denise looked around the room at the residents, at the faces that had been neutral a week ago, then trusting, now questioning. That was the shift. Not the documents, not the law, the people, because once they stopped believing her, everything else followed. "This is being misrepresented," she said, voice tightening. "We've maintained this community for years. We've improved the lake, the road." "I maintained the road," I said. I hadn't spoken until then. Didn't need to. But now it mattered. Every eye turned to me. "I've got receipts," I added. "Gravel, culvert repairs, fuel, every spring for the last 8 years. I didn't raise my voice, didn't step forward. Just said it. And let it land." A man near the front shook his head slowly. "We've been paying for that," he said. No one answered him, because the answer was already there, on the table, in the folder, in the silence. Rachel turned one last page. "Based on the financial records we've reviewed," she said, "estimated collections for lake access and road maintenance exceed $200,000 over the past several years." That broke it completely. Voices rose. Not controlled anymore. Not structured. Questions, accusations, confusion. Denise tried to speak again, tried to regain control, but there was nowhere for it to land. Because control isn't something you can take back once it's lost. Not in a room like that, not with evidence sitting in front of everyone. Sheriff Cruz stepped in one more time. "Ma'am," he said, steady and firm, "we'll need you to come with us to go over some of these details." He didn't say you're under arrest. Didn't need to. The implication was enough. Denise didn't argue. didn't fight. She just stood there for a second longer, looking at the table, at the papers, at everything she'd built. Then she set the clipboard down and walked, just like that. No speech, no last word, no control. The room didn't quiet right away. Took time, people talking over each other, trying to piece together what had just happened. Rachel closed the folder and turned to me. "That's the hard part done," she said. I nodded. "Not all of it," I replied. She followed my glance toward the residence. "Restitution," she said. "That comes next." It did. Over the next few months, everything Denise had built unraveled the same way it went up, step by step, only in reverse. The fence came down first, then the sign, then the kayak rack. Each one removed, documented, corrected. The fees stopped immediately. The accounts were reviewed, money traced, numbers verified. In the end, restitution was ordered, not just returned, multiplied. Because when something's taken under false claims, the law doesn't just correct it, it balances it. The HOA board changed. New people, new structure, less noise, more clarity. They asked me about the road, about access, about what came next. I didn't complicate it. "I'll keep it open," I said. That was it. No fees, no conditions. Because ownership doesn't mean restriction, it means choice. And my grandfather didn't build that road to control people. He built it because it was needed. That didn't change. The lake changed too, not in structure, in use. We opened it up, not as a paid amenity, not as a controlled space, just open. Kids on the bank, lines in the water, same dock, same spot. Lily stood there the first Saturday we did it, showing a younger kid how to bait a hook, same way her mom showed her. Careful, patient, no rush. I stood back and watched. Didn't need to say anything. Didn't need to prove anything. Because everything that mattered was already written down, filed, measured, endured. And that's the difference Denise never understood. Authority can be loud, can be structured, can look official, but ownership, real ownership, doesn't need any of that. It just needs to hold. And it always does.
If there's one thing this whole situation taught me, is this truth doesn't need to be loud to be real. I didn't win anything by arguing harder or reacting faster. I just stayed patient, kept records, and let what was already written speak for itself. Because when something is built on fast, real ownership, real work, real history, it doesn't move just because someone else says it should. There's a quiet kind of strength in that, not pushing back with anger, but standing still long enough for the truth to catch up. As almost of the time, it does. Now, I know a lot of folks watching this have deal with HOA, property dispute, or someone trying to claim something that didn't belong to them. So I'm curious, have you ever been in a situation when you had to stand your ground like that? Go ahead and drop a yes in the comments if you have or share your story. I read more of them than you might think. And if you enjoy stories like this, real situation where patience and common sense matter more than noise, consider subscribing. There's more coming, and I think you want to hear them.